you're coming to this video late, good, because the most useful thing about NVIDIA's RTX Spark launch is not the keynote reel, it's the empty spaces around it. NVIDIA showed a gorgeous new chip, thin laptops, local AI agents, ray tracing, 128 gigs of unified memory, and all the good stuff. What they did not show is the part that usually decides whether the product is amazing or just expensive sci-fi. I'm talking about price, real battery life, sustained thermals, and how much of this gaming promise survives contact with Windows on ARM. If you know, you know. So instead of doing the usual breathless recap, let's do something better. First, we would see what RTX actually is, then we'd answer the bigger question: what NVIDIA carefully didn't tell us. Because this chip could be the most important Windows PC launch in years, or it could be the most beautifully marketed maybe in years, and those are not the same thing. At the hardware level, RTX Spark is NVIDIA folding a Blackwell RTX GPU and a Grace CPU into one Windows first superchip. Officially, we're looking at up to 20 CPU cores, 6,144 CUDA cores, up to 1 petaflop of FP4 AI performance, and up to 128 gigabytes of unified memory. Now, that last number is the headline because it changes the kinds of workloads a portable machine can even pretend to handle. Now, NVIDIA says that this thing can run 120 billion parameter models locally, edit 12K 4:2:2 videos, render 90 gig 3D scenes, and still play AAA games at 1440p over 100 FPS. Now, on paper, this is absurdly ambitious. And that ambition tells you exactly what NVIDIA thinks this PC is becoming. This launch was not mainly about gaming, even though gaming got its spotlight. It was about agents. NVIDIA and Microsoft are pitching a future where your computer stops waiting for your clicks and starts doing multi-step work for you, like searching files, wiring together apps, generating assets, and maybe even coding or editing on your behalf. That's why OpenShell, Windows security primitives, and control were mentioned almost as much as raw silicon. Now, RTX Spark is just a chip, yes, but it is also a platform bet that Windows is about to become an agent operating system. Now, here's where the keynote got very quiet. Let's start with the easiest missing detail: the price. NVIDIA announced the dream, they announced the partners, they announced the fall release window, the gorgeous thin machines, and then just left the most painful number out of the room. And if you've priced a serious creator laptop in Naira lately, you already know why that matters. A machine with this much memory is not going to land in impulse buy territory. Even the developer-focused DGX Spark, which lives in the same large memory family, jumped from $3,999 to $4,699 earlier this year because of memory supply pressure. Now, that doesn't automatically tell us what the consumer Spark laptops will cost, but it absolutely tells us not to expect charity pricing. The second thing they've been quiet about is battery life. NVIDIA keeps saying all-day battery life, and Microsoft repeats it too. But notice what is missing. There are no gaming battery figures, no AI interference endurance numbers, no export time power data, and no clear laptop wattage range. Microsoft's own blog footnotes that battery life claim as internal testing on pre-release units. Now, that's standard launch behavior. But it also means that we are still very far from knowing whether these machines are MacBook level efficient, or just merely good for an RTX system, or only impressive as long as you're checking email and not hammering the GPU. For anyone in Lagos editing on backup power or trying to work through an outage, that is not a side note. That is the spec to look out for. The third thing NVIDIA skips is sustained CPU performance and thermal behavior. We know the desktop dev box carries a 100-watt thermal envelope, which is great. That tells us the chip can breathe in a mini PC. But the whole fantasy NVIDIA is selling is slim 14mm laptops that are still serious AI and gaming machines. That is a much tougher engineering story. And until independent reviewers loop exports, compile code, run local models, and play for an hour unplugged, we do not know whether RTX Spark is a monster that happens to be thin, or a monster that only wakes up for short benchmark bursts. And then there is gaming, which might be the most interesting promise and the easiest one to oversimplify. Now, NVIDIA says RTX Spark supports major anti-cheat and DRM systems, and Microsoft says solutions like Easy Anti-Cheat and BattleEye plus the Xbox PC app will help open up a deeper game catalog on Windows on ARM. That is real progress. It matters. It removes one of the biggest reasons ARM gaming PCs have felt half-finished. But it does not magically mean that every Windows game becomes a native, no-compromise experience overnight. A lot of these games will still end on Prism emulation because they were built for x86, not ARM. So yes, anti-cheat may finally stop blocking the door, but once you get through the door, you still have to ask how much performance has been left on the table, what breaks under edge cases, and which titles only look good in carefully chosen demos. NVIDIA clearly knows this is a weak point, which is why they were eager to name drop Fortnite, Valorant, and the Nouveau class compatibility. It's a smart move, I'll give it to them. But that is still a launch promise, not a completed report card. And if I'm being honest, creators might be the strongest early case for RTX Spark. The unified memory makes immediate sense for Premiere, Photoshop, Blender, comfy UI, and large scene or timeline work. NVIDIA says Adobe is re-architecting Prime and Photoshop around the platform. Blender is getting DLSS 4.5 ray reconstruction, and even AI video workflows in comfy UI are getting frame generation help. That is a much cleaner pitch than, trust us, thin Windows laptops can now replace every gaming gig. And if you live inside CUDA-heavy tools and you want something portable, this starts to look very compelling. But again, the missing piece is not vision, it's measurement. The developer angle is strong too, maybe even stronger than the consumer angle. A local Windows machine with up to 128 GB of unified memory, CUDA, WSL, VS Code, PowerShell 7, and a desktop option designed for sustained loads. That makes sense, especially if you're tired of paying API bills just to prototype ideas that you wish could stay local. NVIDIA says RTX Spark can handle 120B parameter models locally. And Microsoft is clearly preparing Windows to be the control plane for these agent workflows. That is not small. But the funny part is this: the clearest version of the product so far is not the thin luxury laptop. It's the dev box on a DeX. And that brings us to the deepest unanswered question. Do people actually want this version of the PC? Because NVIDIA is not just asking you to buy faster hardware. They're asking you to accept more operating system level intelligence, more automation, and more trust in policy layers you didn't create. OpenShell sounds smart on paper: sandboxing, metered resources, verified permissions, policy enforcement, cloud routing rules. And Microsoft's message is that you can stay in control. Fine, but the whole product vision still depends on users feeling comfortable with agents that can see their apps, touch their files, and act across workflows. That trust problem is why NVIDIA kept stressing local, private, and secure. And to be fair, local inference plus large unified memory plus Windows security primitives is a much better story than dumping everything into the cloud. But even NVIDIA's own description of OpenShell includes the ability to route queries to cloud models based on policy. So the real conversation is not local or cloud, it's who sets the boundaries, how transparent those boundaries feel, and whether normal people will bother configuring them. Enthusiasts like me, I'm a geek, I might, but the truth is most people barely manage browser permissions. One more thing NVIDIA would probably prefer not to overemphasize is that the idea itself isn't unique. AMD has already been pushing large memory AI PCs with Strix Halo, and Apple has been proving for years that tightly integrated CPU, GPU, and memory can make laptops feel ridiculously good. NVIDIA's special advantage isn't that it invented unified memory laptops. Its advantage is the software modes. We have CUDA, RTX, creator app relationships, game ecosystem leverage, and now a synchronized push with Microsoft. In other words, RTX Spark wins or loses less on concepts and more on execution. So here's my take. RTX Spark looks real. The hardware looks serious. The Windows ecosystem support looks stronger than anything we've seen from ARM PCs in a long time. And if NVIDIA actually lands the creator and developer experience, this could be a big deal. But the launch was also classic NVIDIA. Massive vision, polished demos, and just enough missing detail to keep the hardest questions off stage. If pricing is brutal, if unplugged performances collapses, if thermals throttle, or if gaming compatibility is patchier than advertised, the narrative changes fast. So for now, RTX Spark is not a scam, not a gimmick, and not an automatic revolution either. It's a very expensive promise waiting for real benchmarks. So tell me this, if NVIDIA ships the perfect RTX Spark laptop tomorrow, would you actually want an agent-first PC on your desk? Or do you just want a brutally fast laptop with all the agent stuff turned off? Drop what you think in the comments. And if you want to follow up when reviews and pricing finally land, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on anything, because that is when the story gets really honest. My name is Josh, and this is Tech Mansion, where tech lives, and I'll see you in the next video.